right, let's go. I'll say g'day everybody because A, I'm in Australia, and B, I don't know what time of day it is where you are, but I am Andrew Stammer. I'm the director at CSIRO Publishing here in Melbourne. And I'm also an STM board member elected under the non-US, non-European category. And so it's appropriate that I'm chairing this or hosting this STM Trends special event for the STM members who are in the Asia Pacific. This has been coordinated by the China and Japan chapters of the STM and also by the Scholarly and Journals Committee here in Australia. We've got people joining us from a lot of countries and from regions right throughout the Asia Pacific region. We've had an outstanding number of registrants for this event. 89 people have registered from 31 different businesses. So I thank you all for joining, and I issue you with a very warm welcome. I believe that STM produced its first trends poster 15 years ago. And that now that's an annual event and is viewed and used extensively by STM members and people beyond. By knowing how the trends posters are compiled and having them explained can significantly add to their value. And so we're delighted that Caroline Sutton, STM CEO, will present this year's trends for us today. You can put your questions and or comments in the chat, and we'll go through those after the presentation. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Caroline Sutton, STM CEO, former publisher in her own right, and all-round excellent person. Caroline is beaming in from, I think, Oslo in Norway, where I don't know what the time is, but I can be pretty sure at this time of year, it will be daylight there. So Caroline, over to you and to lead us through this year's STM Trends. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. And just to let everyone know that this is being recorded so that, you know, if you're putting in anything in the chat, just so that you're aware of that, so that we can share with those who are unable to attend today but registered. Thank you so much, Andrew. And yes, it is daylight here, almost around the clock. We just had the longest day and it's 8:30 in the morning. So great to see everyone. Let me share my screen with you. So I'm just going to get up my slideshow. And here we go. Just going to make sure I've got the slideshow on there. Excellent. Okay. And I hope you're not seeing yourselves because that came up in the corner here. Whoops. And also I'm having some problems with my slide already. There we go. So again, great to see everybody online here. And let me have this opportunity to present to you our STM Trends. And it's called 2027 because we're looking ahead over the next five-year period, what's going to be really key in our industry and affecting us. And this year's theme is level up, master the new complexities, and go for the top. And as you'll see, this is based on the idea of a board game. And I'll explain that board game in a few moments. As Andrew noted, we've been doing this exercise of the trends for a number of years now, and it really is about expressing our future vision, not in a long report, but just in one image or an infographic that says it all. And that graphic is really meant to be a discussion starter more than a report. So this is not us telling you everything about this topic or topics, but rather it's about awakening a discussion that you can take back to your own organizations and kind of think about what this might mean for your organization and what is it that you know about this topic that you can add to what we're presenting. So if you're new to the trends, I hope you'll enjoy the way in which we visualize what we think will be the most impactful developments over the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm not going to keep you waiting. Let's dive in. So this year, as I said, the edition of the STM Trends is a board game, and it's loosely based on a game that is quite well known in some areas of the world, though I know not all. So I will explain this a bit more in detail. There's a game called Snakes and Ladders, which, for example, I played as a child in North America. I know it's also been played in other areas of the English-speaking world. So I believe it started, we'll get to that, I'll give some background, but it started in India, and I think spread from there. But we took the original game and we've built in some extra complexities and some extra challenges that reflect the core of the discussions that we had. And I'll explain to you in a little bit what those are and why we included them. But what's really important is that this is all about having fun as well. And indeed, you can actually play this game with your colleagues or your family at home if you're that nerdy. Because you can download it, and I'll share the link in a little while. You can download it and all of the items from our website. So again, the game is intended to help you master the complexities and to help you make a journey to the top of the game board, and hence the motto, level up. So let's take a look first at the process of how we arrived at this infographic first. We were really excited because after 2 years of lockdown, we were able to bring people together in person as we had done previously. And we had about 25 STM members. We do this annually, bring together a group of people. This year it was in London, and we start to brainstorm together about the future. And we really want to thank, in this context, Springer Nature, who offered us their space in London called the Stables, which was very generous of them. And here we use a particular method called the Delphi method, which is a well-known technique for technology forecasting. The idea is fairly simple. You bring together experts in a certain area. Each of them brings with them their own viewpoints about the future. We have several discussion rounds and eventually reach some convergence of ideas. And the composition of the group is also very important. For the STM trends, we invite members of STM's STEC, so that's our Standards and Technology Committee, the Future Lab committees. So these are senior staff working from STM member organizations in areas like innovation, technology, strategy, business development, and IT. And I can add that it is based in London, which has meant that many of the individuals joining are based around Europe. And I was recently in China and was asked if we might consider how we would include some folks from China so that we could also get a kind of international perspective on some of this. So we're always looking for input, and just to share that with all of you as you look at this image. So I should say that the tech trends editions have often a technical lens. However, in recent years, we have broadened the scope to not only be about technological trends that will affect our industry, but actually much broader, to look at trends and drivers that we think will identify to scholarly communications, be that technology or other types of business trends. And so what we end up with is a room full of views. And as you can see on this slide, we have lots of notes that eventually become a word cloud. And what you're seeing here too is that AI, not surprisingly, was the most heavily identified trend for the next few years, with AI getting very real. We, as I'll show in a few moments, have talked about AI in the past, but it was more of a theoretical understanding of what that might mean. But now with ChatGPT, we really start to see just what might take place in the future. So AI influenced our discussions to a great extent. We talked about good AI versus bad AI, things like trust, digital identity becoming very important. We also talked about paper mills and the fear of being too slow in keeping up with that technology. Maybe the technology and the AI fueling paper mills will run faster than we as publishers are able to move in order to catch up with those developments. We also spoke about synthesis, sustainability, ethics, infrastructure, and platforms. And we talked about collaboration and about new and shared solutions. And I think collaboration has, in my opinion, also been something that I see growing more and more in the conversations I'm having at very high levels with STM members. There is an interest in coming together across the industry to address things that are impossible to address alone. So the final step is an editing committee. And in this case, Heather Staines, together with Ifke Schmidt, who has recently retired from STM, and Hilke Kors, who I know is also joining us today on this call and who is our Chief Information Officer at STM Solutions. They worked together to synthesize all of what had been put down on paper and talked about into a new special edition of the board game Snakes and Ladders. And let me explain why we chose that particular game as a metaphor, but equally explain this game to you because it may be new to you. As I said, the game originally came from India and is more than 2,000 years old. And that's kind of an interesting thing, I think, as well, because we as a publishing industry are not 2,000 years old, but certainly several hundred years old. So there's something about taking something that's very old and bringing it into the modern age that I think also fits with us as a publishing industry. On this slide, you can see a few antique editions from the old archives from this game. It was originally a children's game, and the purpose of it was to teach kids about the good and bad sides of life, about that duality we all face. So we find ladders on the game that help us climb up. That is to progress. They're positive, the ladders. They're a good thing. We can move forward in the game. But we can also, in this game, trip over snakes. And snakes make us go backwards. We fall down and slide down. So it's really about this good and bad, about destiny and desire, about virtue and vice, good karma, bad karma. Good deeds help us go up, and bad acts make us slide down. So that was sort of the intention behind the game originally. And so in some countries, it's been very popular for many generations and in many different forms, as I say. And here again is just some more pictures of it. It became a popular game around the 19th century. So let me dive in to how we have rebuilt this game. And just reminding, as you look at this, that if you land at the bottom of a ladder, you climb up, you progress. If you land on the head of a snake, you slide back down. Within our game, when you'll look at the board game, there are 6 areas with new complexities and hurdles and rewards. So we have sort of 6 areas on our playing board, which is something we've added. So each player needs to travel successfully through these 6 areas, and they all have some hurdles that mean that we'll slide down, as well as some rewards that help us move up in the game. And these 6 areas represent the 6 trends that we see as highly impactful for scholarly communications over the next 3 to 5 years. And I'll take you through each of those. But just to mention, very often our previous versions of the trends have focused in on one single, very broad trend. This year, we're focusing on 6 different things. And we talk about complexities because what you can say that we're experiencing now and over the next 3 to 5 years is precisely that the landscape is becoming much more complex. And our real challenge is, how do we manage multiple complexities that are all impacting upon us at the same time? So let me first take a look here. One of these is, as you see up on the top left here, is artificial intelligence. It's very central and was in all of our discussions, as I mentioned. And it's things like, how do we distinguish what a machine has done from what came from a genuine human mind? And to what extent does that matter? How do we apply AI and benefit from it? So for example, how can we make scholar communications better, faster, and more trustworthy using AI? Somewhat related to that area is digital identity. And as I say, this is related to developments in AI, and in particular, in the wake of generative AI, it is becoming increasingly important to check for provenance of people, of institutions, of the work that was done. You know, this is all about trust. How do we know if we can trust that this is indeed what it says it is, that it is indeed the person that says they are? But at the same time, we have user privacy, which we need to think about, particularly here in Europe and North America, because we need to make sure that researchers can do their work in anonymity, and that provisions for digital identity do not lead to exclusion. And we move down to the third area, which is social responsibility. Science brings progress and makes the world a better place. At least that's the intention. So how can we organize scholarly communications in support of that objective? And publishers recognize a need and an opportunity to be more transparent about how they're doing that. For example, around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I always trip when I'm reading off SDGs in the long name for them. Transparency then takes us to the beginning of the storyline around open research, because closely related to transparency and trust is open research. Many argue that opening up the research process, having researchers share more of their outputs, even at earlier stages, helps to support transparency and trust in science. And this is both about being able to see that and being transparent, but also about the work being reproducible and replicable. It's also about how do we create links between different types of research outputs, and how do we therefore share, link, and cite these works as we drive for more equitable research assessment. So how do we do that, and how do we enrich and not erode the version of record or versions of record? Because some publishers today publish, but then the version of record can be updated as long as we're tracking that. And then I mentioned collaboration, and this is also included in our 6 areas, because to make all of this work, we have to collaborate. These are complex areas. Having a common understanding of them as an industry and then coming together where it makes sense for us to do so is also important. But not just among our industry, because scholarly communications is a field with many stakeholders. So in order to build infrastructure and solutions that make use of the opportunities and avoid the dangers, we need to work together, even though that sometimes can slow us down. And so finally, what you'll find at the very, very top of the game, the top of the pyramid, and the place where we all want to be, is research integrity. And this, of course, is as important as ever, particularly as we know science is under attack by paper mills, by bad actors who are acting without research integrity. And publishers need to rise to the challenge so that we can continue to be the custodians of trusted research. So these 6 areas are at the heart of our trends forecast in this year's edition. And we need to recognize them and we need to master them. So I'm going to go back to the playing field of our board game so you can see where they're all positioned here. So the first thing you'll notice is that the board has the snakes and the ladders in all 6 areas. So what you do in this game is you have a little pawn, so a little figure, and it starts in the very bottom left-hand corner where it says start. And we move across to the right. And once you hit the very end on the right, you then go up to the next row and you move towards the left and then up, so that you go up and down on a zigzag here. But as you're moving up, you encounter on this board game some snakes. And if you hit the head of the snake, you have to slide back down. So if you look at the very bottom here, underneath artificial intelligence, you see a snake, and the head of the snake is on row 3 where it says fake. And if you hit that, because that says these data were fabricated by an AI, then you slide back down to the first row and have to try and move up again. But there's also some squares where you gain points for good acts, or where you, again, lose points because of bad acts or bad karma. So we've got some +3 and -2 you can see there. So you can also be keeping score as you move through this. The 6 areas are color-coded on the playing field. So AI is very centrally placed in orange, as it will also play a central role in the next few years. And very close to it and directly related is digital identity in turquoise. That's down at the bottom right corner. And in purple, and I apologize to anyone who is colorblind. So I'm going to say in the bottom left-hand corner, we have social responsibility, and that's 2 hands holding the globe. And then in red, up at the very top left-hand corner, we have open research. And over to the right, in a pink color with some hands holding, is collaboration. And as I said, the ultimate goal is to reach research integrity, the kind of enlightened state. In the old India version, nirvana was at the top of the screen, nirvana being that ultimate state of being that one could achieve. And here for us, that is trusted research at the very top of the game. So if I take a little tour around those areas to see what events and good and bad things you might encounter as you play the game, I can again go to that artificial intelligence in the middle. And here you say that there's some dangerous snakes that are about paper mill attacks. Sorry, just looking here about fabricated data and about ChatGPT. So you can see there you have -2 points for paper mills use AI to fabricate fake science. And again, as I say, the head of the snake, these data were fabricated by an AI. But there's also some bonus points here. So some positive. If you use AI to speed up research, for example, in medicine by generating research hypotheses, if you are transparent about your AI ethics principles, and there are some penalties for fuzzy authorship, for image manipulation, or again, paper mills that infiltrate your journals, which we unfortunately have seen in recent times. And again, moving over to digital identity, some of the dangers here are big tech surveillance, loss of data privacy, and a huge snake for papers with authors that don't actually exist. On the other hand, you can gain some plus points for clear provenance of data and articles and methods, provenance being that we can actually identify who created these. Also for connecting articles to ORCID IDs, for integrating with seamless access and get FTR, which are products from STM solutions that support authors in sharing and accessing content legally and correctly. Also plus points for implementing privacy preserving and user-friendly solutions such as portable digital identity that we think might be coming in the future. Now, the game starts in the bottom left with social responsibility. And that makes sense because, as we say, ultimately, science and social sciences, humanities, research is all about making the world a better place and improving our state as humans on the planet. And so we need to start from that point, because that ultimately drives our desire to do the work that we do as publishers. And around social responsibility, actions here range from promoting the Sustainable Development Goals to fostering more diversity, equity, and inclusion, and support for scientists in war zones. There are bonus points for climate change research, for more diversity, equity, inclusion work in your publishing house, for supporting Research for Life and the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows Initiative. And just to put in a plug there, we are building a toolkit here at STM, and we will be sharing that with others, as well as some plus points for mentoring programs. But there are some negative points for having too few women on editorial boards or for underrepresentation of the Global South. And there is a snake here for the lack of sufficient credits for early career researchers in peer review. There's a very important corner in our game on open research, as I shared. And again, this is about the reproducibility of research. It's about being more transparent early on in the research cycle. And so we have some plus points here for making research data available in a fair way and supporting that as a publisher. We have plus points for sharing, linking, and citing research data and other outputs, for sharing lab notebooks and data management plans. There are some that is negative points for unclear methods sections and articles that truly explode in the sense that they become wholly unmanageable for peer reviewers or readers because they become too difficult. And as I mentioned, the other corner is dedicated to the importance of collaboration, because it's critical, as I said, to manage all of these complexities. So we have to take those opportunities we have and work together so we can avoid the risks. So around collaboration, we have some bonus points, some plus points for distributed usage logging, for the article sharing framework, and of course, a long ladder. So that is, you can jump a whole bunch and really progress if you join the STM Integrity Hub. We have some minus points here for geopolitical fragmentation and for failing to make use of shared intelligence and tools to combat cybercrime. We also recognize here the icons of some other organizations that are very good at cross-industry collaborations. So if you look around this space, you'll see Crossref, Chorus. There you go, Mark Robertson's on the call, who does work with Chorus, ORCID, and DataCite. And as I said, our ultimate aim is getting up to advancing trusted research. And this is sort of that fifth nirvana, as it was called in the old Indian version of this game. And this key area is all about research integrity. So here we find snakes for paper mills, for predatory journals, as well as minus points for duplicate submissions and citation rings, and for the fact that science is under attack. The latter is for transparency about retractions. There are here some bonus points. I apologize that someone's pulling up. I have the window open because it's very hot today and I have a dog who'll start barking. I hope that doesn't happen. I'll go back. We have, as I say, some bonus points here, and those are for things like joining COPE on the publishing ethics and for applying transparent peer review. And all of these are essential elements to reach the top, advancing trusted research. So as Andrew said, we've been producing these tech trends for quite some time, now called the STM trends. And if you've been following those, you may say, well, some of these things have been covered before, and you can see this on the screen. So last year, what was produced and saying in 2026, the big theme would be the beauty of open at scale. I think it's also very interesting to look back at 2018. One said that the big trend in 2022 would be AI. And what happened in 2022? ChatGPT was released, and we all really started to think about and see what might AI mean in our space and in our lives. So you'd be correct if you said that all of our themes have been covered in the past, or at least some of them. But there's a big difference, which I also mentioned, is that these earlier versions were really kind of musing on what might happen. We could see what technology or what trend was there, but we couldn't quite see what might be the implication of that. But what we see right now, and what we think will continue to happen over the next 3 to 5 years, is that all of these things are now playing out at the same time. And that is adding complexity and a lack of predictability in our space that we all need to think about. How are we going to manage this? So for example, AI has now become practical. And research integrity has become a top item on many agendas within all of your houses, I believe. Certainly when I meet with the CEOs of the members of STM, I continually hear that this is among the top 3 issues that their organizations are grappling with. And so we have a really important role to play as publishers in looking at how we're going to address this complexity. So if I go back to the game, just to review one more time, we see these 6 areas spread out with AI very centrally positioned in the middle, close to digital identity. We see social responsibility where the game begins. And we see at the top, the kind of, if this were a human, there'd be 2 shoulders here, these 2 corners, open research and collaboration, as we work to reach the top of research integrity and advancing trusted research. And what you also see along the left on the game board, if you want to download this, is a description of those areas. But equally, you can find the rules of the game on the sheet. They're fairly self-explanatory, but hopefully my expression and explanation also would have helped you understand this. But it's worth calling out that this is a game that everyone can win. And as I say, the game is meant to spur discussion. And so we invite players to take a moment to discuss between themselves whenever they land on one of the 6 zones. You also, from our website, can download, and in person, we've had some stickers created for these, the so-called pawns. So if you play one of these board games, you often get a little figurine that you can move around the board. And because, of course, this is about multi-stakeholders coming together, as I said. And so you can choose to be a researcher, an author, a reader, a funder as you work through that game. Because there's also that thinking about how do these groups work together to support all of this. So you can choose to be one or several of those and think about how to work together as you work through the game. So I'm reaching the end of the presentation. But again, the motto is level up, master the new complexities, go for the top. We really do encourage you to explore your own journey from the role you play in your organization. How are these things going to affect you? How is it going to affect the groups and stakeholders that you interact with? And what kinds of discussions would be helpful to you to have with those stakeholders and with your colleagues? So we want you to explore those ups and downs and think about opportunities, challenges. Everything has 2 sides, right? It's not just good or bad. And as I come to a close, I also want to thank IEEE, who have been a long time and generous sponsor of the STM trends. We truly couldn't do this without their support. And as you enter that playing field, as I say, on our website, and here is the link. So you go to our website with a /trends 2027. Here you can download and print the game, or just take a look at the video recording again, and you can start playing with your colleagues. Also, if you'd like to look at our previous STM trends, if you haven't seen these before, you can take a look because all of the video recordings are there. And we always say too, but this is an example of it, we do in-house presentations by Zoom or sometimes in person with our members. So if there are any of you here who think, oh, this would be good, and we're an STM member, we'd be happy to book something specific for your organization. With that, I'm going to end my slideshow and I'm going to stop sharing so I can come back and join all of you. And I believe I've done so. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Caroline. It was Very, very, very good. And we can see the little emoji figures of thumbs up and applause and so forth coming from the attendees today. So thank you very much indeed for that presentation. We have a few questions in the chat, but for those of you who would like to add questions, the chat facility is there. So please go for it. But I'm going to go to a very practical one. You did talk about the rules of the game and some of the other information that sit around it. But Ashley Lee has asked, will there be notes capturing the main points of each of the numbered boxes to accompany that accompany the game, and explaining why each thing is important? Are you able to just comment on that very specific question?
Sure. We don't have additional notes beyond what you can find on the website, but the website does have a little bit of a description of each of those, as do, I think we've got the slides that also have some information that kind of captures what I've just shared. So as I say, it's also about having that conversation in your own house as well.
Yep. I think that conversation point is a really good one. Printing off a couple of sets of this and putting it out in the lunchroom, if people are actually not working from home anymore and back in the lunchrooms, is a terrific way of getting the conversations going across staff and across different levels of staff, such that people are sharing their knowledge and talking through the issues, which I think is really beneficial. So thanks for that, Ashley. Really nice opener there. Mark has asked about, and Mark, did you want to speak to this? I think you can, because you're on the call. No? All right, then I'll ask.
No, here
off you go.
Here I come. Give me time, Andrew.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Slowing down in his old age.
My first question for you, Caroline, is you use open research rather than open science, and many groups use open science. I mean, I agree that research is much broader and more useful, but can you just maybe talk a little bit about that, please?
Thank you, Mark. That's a very important point. So when we use open research, it's a way to ensure that we're including humanities and social sciences. Many of those groups say open science always, and even open access, ends up being about the STEM fields and always starts from that perspective. And so we want it to be very inclusive and talk about open research, because that's something that all fields engage in. So open research is kind of that higher level that includes open access, but also what we would understand in many other countries as open science. So sharing of research data, opening up methods, that might look different in different subject areas, of course. And that's part of the challenge, I think, too, personally, which we don't talk a lot about here, but as publishers, particularly those who work in the humanities and social sciences, I think we work with building communities around journals, and we have an opportunity to work with those communities to help think, what does this look like in your area? If you are in a field of qualitative sociology, for instance, what does open research look like? So thank you. I think when I say open research, it may well be what others would call open science. In, for example, Germany, I think, talks about open science. I think China says open science and not open research. So yeah, thank you.
And shall I do my second question, Andrew?
Yes, please.
The second question is interesting that in the snakes and ladders board, there are some huge snakes, which one comes down, and then there are other places where you just lose a couple of points. How did the group go assessing what was a point loss and what was going to be a small or a medium-sized snake to slide down?
That's a really good question. Actually, I'm just going to look for a moment and see if Hilke is still on, and if I can open up his mic, he can share with us how they were thinking. Yeah, he is. Hilke, I've just hit to allow you to talk. Are you able to speak to that?
I believe so. Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Thanks for the question, Mark. So for the snakes and the ladders, to be frank, we took quite a bit of creative liberty, shall we say? So don't assign too much value or too much significance in the relative length of a given snake or a given ladder. For the points, initially we had, so you will see all the bonus points are +3, all the minus points are -2. Initially, we had also made that into a range, but then the response that we had at one of the preview sessions is that people indeed felt that we were sort of making a normative statement like this thing that might happen is worse than that thing that might happen. And we felt that that wasn't quite right. So that was a conscious decision to make that all equal. +3 and -2, because we do remain optimists. But for the snakes and the ladders, the gameplay would be a little dull if they're all exactly the same size. So there we added a little bit of freedom to change that, but don't read too much interpretation or significance into the relative length of these.
A bit of liberties have been taken, in other words. Yeah. For the sake of getting the job done.
Thank you, Hilke. Another question coming in from the chat from Hejia Wei. Could we use AI to defeat AI? That's a great discussion type question for when you're actually playing the game. But would you like to make a few comments on that point, Caroline?
Gosh, I think that is interesting. And I have been in a number of panel discussions, and we as STM have been hosting some webinars around AI. And I think that's part, as you say, the discussion there is this fear that if AI is working faster than we are, how can we keep up with AI that is working to deceive us? And so one example, I think, Hilke, you're still on the call, but I know that in the STM solutions with the Integrity Hub, there is this opportunity of potentially using some AI to help us detect potential paper mill papers, but equally concerned that as soon as we figure out how to identify them using one way, that new AI could be developed to trick us in another way.
Hilke, did you want to add to that?
That was exactly going to be my example, but yes, this is a perfect discussion prompt. I just, a couple of thoughts from me. Defeat, I don't think I would choose that word. I think AI is here to stay, right? And it's going to influence us in good ways and in bad ways. But yes, you do see, several areas where sort of AIs are counteracting each other, if you like. There's even a technical term for there. You have like adversarial neural networks and technologies like that. And yeah, specifically within the context of the Integrity Hub, we are looking at deploying technology based on AI to detect if a certain manuscript or parts of it have been generated by generative AI. I will say, and this is a rapidly moving field, right? But when we looked at this in a lot of detail a couple of months ago, we were not convinced that there are detection technologies that are really sufficiently accurate and precise to be used at this point in time. But again, this is a very rapidly changing field. There was an interesting scientific publication a week ago where a research group did claim that they are now able to detect content generated by a GPT 3.5 with a good accuracy and precision. So to be determined. It's going to be an interesting time. It's sort of an arms race, maybe a bit of a loaded metaphor, but this will be a time of AI being used on both sides of the equation, if you like.
Thank you, Hilke. And as I see you've put some questions in as well, I'm going to ask you to come off mute and perhaps speak to those questions yourself so that Caroline and Hilke can comment. And I should tell the assembly here that Anders Carlson is the convener and leader of the STM Japan chapter. So terrific to have you here, Anders, with your questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I think this is all very useful. So just let me take two questions, actually. So I have not played Snakes and Ladders. So the question is first question is, how do you define winning the game, and how does that work in this context? The second one, which I think I can take, is that when you had the Delphi sessions, doing the foresight, how much of the current AI boom we now see had actually occurred? Because as Hilke was saying, this is a very fast moving field.
Yeah. So just to the latter, we held this session in December of 2022. So it was fairly soon after, I would say, you know, that the announcements around ChatGPT. So let's say that it was at a fairly, because as you say, it's moved quickly since then, because now we're at July, and even since then, there's been a new version of that, and we have become aware of many other similar large language models and AI, generative AI programs and tools. So that I can say about that. How do you win this game? So in the old traditional version of this game that I played as a child, it was really about how we get to the very top of the board, whoever got there first. And you have to have an exact number when you throw the dice to land on that. So sometimes you might be, you know, two people at the end just throwing the dice to win. In ours, we want everyone to be able to win, but what we've also said is that we want you to get to the top, but you're also keeping the plus and minus scores as you go. And what we explain in the rules is that the first one to get to that final box gets an extra 3 points. And for every one of the fellow players that comes, and the second one gets 2 points, and the third one gets 1 extra point for everybody who's behind them. So the idea here, if you really want to play it as a game with a winner, you can then add up your points at the end of the game. So it's the points that count, and you get some points for being the first, second, and third person to reach the top. But again, we want everybody to win ultimately. So in that sense, we don't want to have any winners and losers, but everybody should be trying to get to the top of the board.
So basically a follow-up question on that. What's the, since this is the STM industry tech trends, what does winning the game mean? And if you come in as an external player, let's say you are a librarian, policymaker, does winning mean the same thing? And what's the underlying meaning of winning in this case?
This is great. And these are the types of, I love this because this is the type of conversation one can have. And I can mention that I was at a conference in May, just shortly after we released this, that is a conference that brings together publishers and librarians. And they loved this. And even at the drinks, because I brought some physical versions and they were, you know, playing around. And so I think those are those, as I said, it's about having that conversation. And so I think thinking together in one's team about, is my understanding of open research and its success the same as that of other stakeholders that we might talk about here? And how do we be inclusive with that? So, and I think that's part of these trends. They always, in some ways, raise more questions than they answer. They're almost about raising questions. So, and just to follow up, Hilke also on that question about ChatGPT did share in the chat that it was GPT-3 that was just out when we did the brainstorm. So as we were saying, a lot has happened since we put this together, in fact.
Mark, you've got another question there about, is there a potential danger when two of the issues on the board, paper mills and AI, converge into being one very large issue? Great question. Caroline or Hilke?
I think that's also what we tried to put, because these 5 things all kind of intertwine. And as you point out, Mark, any one bit of that, be that the AI and paper mills, but there could have been 2 other things when they come together, kind of create something bigger there. So yeah, I'm sure that could be the case. I don't know if Hilke has any thoughts about that.
I'm sure it's happening already, right? We do know that paper mills are also weaponizing, deploying AI. So there is, there is some level of at least overlap, not full convergence. There is an interesting thought about this, just sort of as a discussion idea or something to ponder about. And I read this in an article on higher education more than scholarly publication. In that article, the author made the point that with the advent of generative AI and the ease, it also becomes much easier for individuals to generate a fake piece of content in that case was an essay, or but it could be, you know, an article or a book chapter for submission. If it also lowers the barrier to just do this yourself, right? As opposed to having to go to an organization like a paper mill. So it's going to be interesting to see if that technology is going to strengthen the paper mill actors, or actually play in their cards in the sense that it's going to be easier for people to just do things themselves. So we'll have to see.
It's also going to feed into the peer review steps in the board game.
Yes.
That everybody has to be very alert to make sure that we find these things with us.
Yeah.
And I like that Hejia Wei has chipped in again and has observed maybe we can teach ChatGPT not to do bad things from now on. Good luck with that. But I do think in going to the how do you define the winner, ultimately it has to be surely that the research record is preserved and is accurate and reliable and not polluted, and we all have a part to play in that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not seeing any further questions, and we are coming up to 26 minutes past the hour. So if there are no more questions, I would like to thank Caroline for her presentation. I'd like to thank the team who put this together for their input, because it really is fantastic. I think it's just so clever and imaginative. Thank you to Anders Carlson and Mark Robertson, who've been behind the scenes today and making stuff happen. Hilke, thank you for your contribution. And thank you to all the people who participated in this today. There is a recording. Encourage your colleagues to go and have a look at it, and download the game and have a go at it over lunch or morning tea or something like that, because I think it is a terrific conversation starter. The idea that some of us might take it out and share it with some librarians and run the contest there, I think would be a really fabulous one too. So thank you very much, everybody, for your participation today, and all good wishes for the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Have a nice evening, everybody. Great to see you. Take care.